Okay. Now, there are two terms here. There is GMO and there is transgenic. Ooh. They are different. They're related but different. A genetically modified just means you have changed the genome. Yes? Transgenic means you've taken the DNA from one species and put it into another species. Why can you do that? What makes that possible? DNA is universal. Why is DNA universal? What made DNA universal?
Well, there was that big killing of like...
There was the big killing, which has got a technical term called a mass extinction. 96% of life died, and from there we had a radiation, a divergence from which all life came. And because all of the cells that were alive in that 4%, all cells that radiated out from that, all species that radiated out from that, have DNA as their genetic code. This is what I had, my ideas. Okay? So the reasons that I thought of for creating transgenic or GMOs, all right, was to increase the yield and output of crops. Or for animals, for that matter. If you're talking about the Belgian blue cow or something like that, we make it for meat production, right? But quite often when we say increasing the yield, we're thinking about making bigger and tastier oranges. But it can be both plants and animals. The next thing is I've got to increase genetic diversity. So if a species is becoming too inbred and maybe subject to genetic drift, and it's looking like, because the variation is really tiny in the population, and so we're at increased risk of extinction, which is another one of your dot points, we want to fix it before it's a problem. Yeah. So we want to incorporate variation. All right? So genetic diversity is trying to incorporate more genes to make them more capable of putting up with changes in the selection pressures. Okay? Conservation is allowing, it's related because they're all related. They're all related. You're changing the genetic code of things for a reason. And none of the reasons are terribly different from each other, but you do need to be able to flesh them out. All right? So conservation is once again preparing the population for possible events that might end the species existing. All right? You're trying to make it viable. You're trying to limit genetic drift, and we already know genetic drift is going to occur. We're going to try and limit it so that even with the loss of alleles, they're still going to have enough variation to survive the selection pressures. Okay? We need to be able to find ways to make sure that the population can cope with change. Even small changes, if there's no genetic diversity, even a small change will wipe out the population, where if there's a little bit of variation in there, the species will continue. But if you're down to the last couple of individuals, you're already at the risk of extinction. Okay? By having genetic diversity, it allows it to cope with changes in the environment. Okay? The next one I've got is resistance to disease. Okay? Resistance to disease.
Oh, disease.
If we know that there is a disease out there that is capable of wiping out a population or wiping out a species, you can go and find the resistance gene from another species and incorporate it into the species you're trying to save. Yep. So that it doesn't become another statistic. Yep. And then the last one I've got is to increase nutrition. So we're using it to save the third world countries. Remember, we've got golden rice. Oh, the one with resistance. We've also got BT cotton, using the botulism toxin, that kills a type of grub that feeds on the cotton plant. Nutrition, talking about golden rice, which is incorporating the production of vitamin A into rice, which is a food staple that feeds a majority of the world, but a majority of the third world countries that can't afford proper nutrition. By incorporating vitamin A, it reduces the amount of disease in their population.